With the Crash revival back in 2017 and the ongoing remake of Crash Team Racing, it's fair to assume that the Crash Bandicoot franchise is going strong, so obviously people are already speculating on what's Activision's next step. Could it be a new title? Or perhaps a remaster of an old game? Maybe one which had some potential rather than a cheap knockoff, or some awful Mario Party clone. Yeah, come on, you read the title, let's just get this over with.
Crash Twinsanity.
In this video, I will be talking about why Twinsanity was released the way it was, and most of its cut content, and why in my opinion, is the most deserving of a remake. Twinsanity began development somewhere around 2002, after Oxford Studio passed the project for a Crash Team Racing sequel to Vicarious Vision. Their idea was from the beginning to create a free-roaming game in the likes of Jak and Daxter, a sci-fi atmosphere where Crash had to partner up with his nemesis, Cortex. Together, they had to fight new enemies, the evil twins and their army of robotic ants, which were out to collect materials from different planets to create their perfect world. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's awfully close to the plot of another popular game at the time, Ratchet & Clank. Unfortunately, they noticed those similarities way too far into development, which caused them to shift the focus more on the dynamic between Crash and Cortex and work with what they had so far, since the deadline for a 2004 release was never changed. The game picks up after the events of Wrath of Cortex, with the evil scientist and Uka Uka stranded in the ocean inside of a block of ice, floating towards Insanity Island. Once Cortex gets himself free, he starts planning right away his revenge. After taking out Coco and disguising as her to lure Crash into his trap, he successfully takes him in front of all of his past enemies and ends a new creation.
Mecha Bandicoot!
But after Crash easily defeats Cortex once again, the evil scientist completely loses his staff and blindly attacks Crash, dragging him deeper and deeper into the mines. After some minutes of scuffling around, the two find a power crystal, but right after collecting it, they're met with an army of robo ants. After defeating them, Crash and Cortex find themselves forced to cooperate to get out of the mineshaft, and once outside, they're met with the brains behind their previously encountered robot enemies, the evil twins, a pair of space birds from another dimension, threatening to destroy the island for some personal reasons. This meant that Crash and Cortex had to set their differences aside to fight this new evil and embark on an adventure that would take them into tons of new places with a game time of practically 3 hours, repetitive level design, and countless of plot holes. And all of this is a shame, because I dug deep into all the scrapped ideas or stuff which just couldn't be finished by the deadline, and most of this is pretty good. From the information I've gathered, it seems like they switched the focus from planets like previously mentioned to dimensions, as the 10 dimensions, the final level of the game, had more depth to it. Plus there were more sections exploring Coco's and Cortex's brain, basically going Psychonaut style before that game even came out. Starting from the beginning, it seems that everything would have more or less played out the same until the reveal of the evil twins, minus some cut sections like the bug run, the very first chase sequence where Crash would have been attacked by a swarm of beetles. It was cut not only because of its difficulty, but also because of technical reasons. I found this comment from one of the developers of the game, which explains it in more depth. You can pause the video if you want to read it. Also, I will link his channel into the description, as he has tons of footage of cut content from the game, if you ever want to check it out. Now, going from what I found, here's how the story would have progressed. After the first encounter with the evil twins, and maybe a Crash running after a literal brainless Cortex, the two must cross an arbor area. This place would have featured levels where you could play as Coco, such as an underwater sub-level and an ostrich race. There was even a race against the Komodo brothers for a power crystal, with Crash and Cortex having to ride on a car with no brakes, with Cortex dressed up as a girl screaming at Crash in the style of Outrun. Once through, Crash and Cortex would have had to ride on Capus Capus' boat, a new character likely related to Papu Papu, to Iceberg Island. After accessing the laboratory and discovering that even Aku Aku and Uka Uka's powers combined cannot defeat the evil twins, Cortex accepted to team up officially with Crash to take them down, especially after he was about to be sold out by his own evil mask. I guess it's important to know that the evil twins mentioned some kind of riches in the 10 dimensions that are also overheard by Entropy, which would explain a lot of things later on in the game, but I have no idea how this was originally structured. So the two set out to gather the missing crystal to power up Cortex's machine that would teleport them into the 10th dimension. It was in possession of Engine, currently located into his battleship about to set sail. Real quick, one interesting detail here is that when they crash into Dingodale's hut later in the game, Originally, he was serving a cocktail to Tana, which was a much more smooth rendition of the characters rather than just reading a book. Anyway, story-wise was mainly unchanged in the game to justify his presence later, as he's also going for the treasures after Cortex briefly mentions them. Cortex disguises himself as a girl to not attract any attention, surprisingly resulting in him getting captured by an aroused engine.
Now that's my kind of woman!
Here Crash would have had to climb his way up to the battleship to save Cortex, fighting through rhino pirates and rats. Notably, Rusty Walrus had a much bigger role in the game. Not only he was going to chase you through the ship, but it was also going to turn into a full boss battle. After reaching Engine and saving Cortex, hopefully with a better boss battle than the one we actually got, a stack of TNT crates blows up the ship, blasting Crash to Entropy and Embryo, which are demanding more information about the treasures. Once they're dealt with and the duo obtain the last crystal, Crash and Cortex head back to the lab to activate the portal to the 10th dimension. Here Coco attacks Cortex, breaking his machines while paralyzing herself once again, this time creating a malfunction which opens a portal to a part of her brain, her personality. This is where Cortex would have had to explore this area, taking down countless of stuffed animals and cutesy characters. This was likely cut as it doesn't progress much into the story, but I'm sure with some excuse of why Cortex is inside of Coco's brains, this could have been a fun level. Maybe it's not his choice to explore her personality, maybe he just gets sucked in like he was at the end of the game, where he gets stuck inside of Crash's brain. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Cortex decides that the best course of action is to head off to the Academy of Evil to get help from his niece, Nina Cortex, to fix his machine. Everything here is more or less the same as the final game, minus some cut content which would have given us a view of their time at the Academy for the young trio of Cortex, Embryo and Engine. Also an interesting fact, they were supposed to be ambient voices of students learning how to spell nice things.
I shall destroy you. D-E-S-T-O-R-Y. Destroy.
Now here things get a bit messy, as most of the last third was clearly rushed to meet the deadline. There are two possible ways the story could have progressed. Either Crash, Cortex and Nina would have had encountered the 10th Dimensions version of Cortex for a quick gag,
Welcome to the 10th.
or the duo would have had switch personality.
I feel nice. And I can't stand it!
Here Crash had to hurt Cortex in a level structure like the ones where he had to protect him, but for the opposite result. Cortex getting hurt would have brought him back to his evil form, while it's unclear how Crash would have turned normal. As fun as this concept sounds, I don't know how it would have been implemented into the storyline, so I'll stick to the first scenario to progress the story. Here everything would have played out like the final game, with Crash riding on Cortex chasing evil Crash riding on Nina, Crash having to save Cortex from evil Crash, and them reaching the Chamber of Treasures with Embryo, Entropy and Engine getting toasted by Spyro. There was supposed to be more exploration of Twinsanity Island with a lava version of Ice Climb, a chase sequence on Cortex hoverboard, and a Train Express level heading to the Crate Factory with Koala Kong as the conductor. I guess it's important to mention that there was a scene with evil Coco right after Crash would have saved both Nina and Cortex, which, well, it's kind of weird.
Ain't that sweet? It's a real man who ain't afraid to show his feelings, and my mom says real men prefer their cocoa hot and bitter.
Once at the end, the boss battle was structured the same as the final game, with Nina and Cortex using their special moves and Crash riding on the mech from the beginning of the game. The evil twins are defeated, Cortex gets stuck inside of Crash's brain, see you in the sequel. Which obviously never happened, as Crash Twinsanity sold less than Wrath of Cortex, and Traveler's Tales Oxford Studio shut down for good. All we know is that it would have seen Crash getting sucked into various TV shows by an invention created by Cortex. This was likely repurposed for Mind Over Mutants, and being such an uninteresting idea, it fits the game perfectly. Much more interesting though, was the concept for a game starring Cortex. See him getting kicked out from the mad scientist group for fraternizing with Crash. We don't know much about this game as there isn't much information about it, only that it would have seen Cortex getting revenge on some classic Crash villains and some new characters. Crash Twinsanity is something special. from the fantastic music to the hilarious dialogues, which still hold up fantastically to this day. It had a troubled development from the beginning, and with just one more year, it could have been the true next step for the franchise in the next generation of consoles. Not only showed respect for the original material, it knew how to evolve from it, which is why this will be the perfect timing to remake this game properly. All eyes are on the franchise again, and from all my research, I see tons of people still passionate about this game. I wouldn't mind if they reuse the same design as the Insane trilogy, but I'd say if they went with more of a cartoony approach to the overall aesthetic, it would benefit a lot from it. Hell, if Skylander gets a different cartoony look, why not Twinsanity? After all, it was the only game on the PS2 that didn't look like this, or this. So, considering how the lead concept artist wrote an open letter to Vicarious Visions stating that he would be open for a remake, and the writer and designer Paul Gardner, even if involved with new projects, still looks back at the franchise with great nostalgia, a Twinsanity remake would be a great success. All I'm asking is that if they're going to remake the music, give us an option like in Spyro Reignited Trilogy to have the original soundtrack. Extend the length of the game by adding the good cut content and more new stuff, rebuild Crash moveset to be just as good if not even better than in Crash 3, and scrap that monstrosity, please.
I'm not thirsty.
Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba